Good morning, everybody. This is Andrew Jordan, and I'm here to talk some Torah with you. I wanted to continue looking in Parashat Bereshit, the first chapter of the book of Genesis, or Bereshit, and continue to look at the next few verses. As you can see on the screen, I've pulled up the first chapter of Genesis. Last week we looked at verse 1 and 2. We compared the Jewish Publication Society translation of Genesis 1 and 2 from Hebrew into English with my own translation. And we've focused on some of the issues that were at play with the linguistic structure of the words that we see in Hebrew and how to translate them into English. So today I want to start with verse 3. And like we did last week, we'll look through the Targum, the translation into Aramaic, typically, and see how those the words were translated into Aramaic, and subsequently from Aramaic into English to see how that compares with the English to the translation of Hebrew to English. Since we're doing 3 verses, I still want to go verse by verse just to really understand each issue at hand. So verse 3 starts with Vayomer Elohim Yehi Or Vayhi Or. It's a simple sentence, but there's always something to unpack in the meaning of the sentences. So we start in Hebrew with Vayomer, which is our first example of the famous Vav construct, which I'll talk about in a second. And you'll notice that it's in the singular form, if you're familiar at all with Hebrew grammar, in the imperfect tense, but with the Vav construct put on the beginning, which changes things a little bit. Typically, we'll save that for a little later. We'll come back to it. Elohim is plural in form, but is singular in meaning. And you might be familiar with the name of God, Yud He Vav He, which is used in later texts. And the use of different names for God can be used to signify different attributes of God in Jewish tradition, and also relates to source criticism, understanding the textual history of the Torah, which we can attribute to different source texts. Essentially, that's what the goal would be. And so let's look over here first at the Targum, which is older, at least the Onkelos Targum into Aramaic is rabbinic era. So we can see and open it up here. And the setting is being weird. Okay, so I guess we have to just flip back and forth between Aramaic and English, but it's very similar here. It's to the Hebrew. It's not much different. Let there be light, and there was light. Let there be light, and there was light. Exactly the same. And the Aramaic words are the same too, just in the Aramaic form rather than Hebrew, which you can see slightly different, but not much. Let's look at the Targum of Saadia Gaon from much later, but from which he translated from Hebrew into Arabic, written here in Judeo-Arabic in the block script that we're familiar with. I unfortunately do not understand Arabic, so I have to rely on the translation here. And he has taken this in quite a different direction with one of the words you'll see very quickly. So we have the word that we're going to focus on here for a second is vayomer, from the root, which it pulls up here when you do that in Sefaria, which is aleph mem resh amar, which means to say, to speak, utter. You could translate it. So we can see here that in different forms it has other meanings, but right now we're kind of here, and it's so let's look at his Targum first, and then we'll come back to that. So we're in Arabic. So Allah willed that there should be light, and there was light. Now, the word translation of will is different from vayomer, which is translated typically as to he said, God said. So we have our first interesting bit here. We could look at the other translations and see if there's anything interesting, but there's not really, from my perspective. I think the main issue with this first verse is going to be the translation of this word here. So let's see if we can pull that back up on the. Oh, now it's not doing the. So we can go find it over here in BDB, which is a reference of biblical Hebrew. For some reason, when I did it the second time, it didn't pull it up for me, but that's okay. And I guess it must have pulled up a different resource the other time. Anyway, okay. So we're here and we can see some of the etymology. We have Aramaic, the same root, Ethiopic. Not sure how to pronounce that, but we can see here show, declare, and that's the Arabic command. And you can see some other in the other binyanim here, like the other patterns that we might have, how we could translate it differently. And so let's look and just see if there's anything that might show us if there's anything that we could find that would be kind of like to will, like we saw in the Sa'adia Gaon, which the other dictionary was more interesting. I don't know where that one went. Maybe I could find it. Maybe I'll do a quick comment to this video when I could find that, just to not belabor the point. But in any case, it's different. There it is. Okay, that's what. So sorry about that. I was looking for this one. It's just laid out a little easier to see here. But I noticed earlier that it had the word to intend as a possible translation, which was the only thing that was that was interesting to me with this, how Sa'adia Gaon decided to translate this. And also you could say in one's heart, you could see that to mean will. And I'm not going to do that right now, but I'm assuming, and Sa'adia was a well-known grammarian from Babylonia, so I'm not willing to say that he was incorrect. I'm assuming that if you analyzed all the cases of this root, that you could probably come up with will as being a pretty good translation. So that's something to keep in mind as we go forward. But let's look at the commentary really quickly. Rashi doesn't say anything about this verse, so we can skip over that. I really just focus on Rashi and Ibn Ezra. Those are my two go-to commentaries. Rashi usually presents midrashic material, and Ibn Ezra is a very close to focused on the peshat, the simple reading of the text. So, and it's interesting here with Ibn Ezra, which is why I wanted to show you Sa'adia Gaon, because he mentions how he translated that into Arabic as God willed or wanted. So then what does Ibn Ezra say about that? He disagrees, because he says if that scripture wanted us to say that, we would have a different formulation than what we do in the text that we have. So he says that we should go with said in this case, and you can see in the notes sometimes they add other important things to know about, but to think about. But I think I ultimately went with Ibn Ezra here in my translation, which I'll show you at the end my own translation of these three verses. Let's jump down to the next verse really quickly. And we have in the text here, so we're in the second one. I'm just going to make it a little bigger. There we go. Okay. Vayere Elohim et haor kitov vayabdel Elohim ben haor u ben hachoshech. So it's talking here about God saw that the light was good, and that God separated the light from the darkness. Separate the light from the darkness. So let's see if we have anything to look at here in the Targum, starting with Onkelos. And we can check both sides here. And we can see that God saw that the light was good, and Elohim divided the light from the darkness. I think we have, this is more or less how it's translated in the JPS. So it's in English, directly from English to Hebrew, and Hebrew to Aramaic in the Targum, and then Aramaic to English in this translation of a translation. We have a pretty standard translation there, nothing to worry about. Let's see what Sa'adia Gaon has. Also, when Allah knew that the light was good, Allah divided between the light and the darkness. So we have a difference in translation of the word. Here we see that we use the word saw with the root here, but Sa'adia used to know. So that's something to note. We'll look at that in a second. And then some of the other Targums here, it looks pretty similar. They say beheld, but let's look at the root over here. Okay, so yeah, typically this is used, the root, I'm going to make it a little bigger just so we can see. The root ra'a with resh, aleph, he typically means to see, but it can mean to perceive. That'll become important in a second. It can also have this connotation. Let's go down to BDB here. See if there's anything interesting with the, here we go, okay, with the etymology or anything like that. So we have some things here. See, oh, okay, hold on. See, okay, here we go. Sorry about that. It just kind of got, I double clicked and it didn't like that. So Arabic to see, Ethiopic appearance, feature, so it's kind of going in the same light there. Okay, so let's look at the commentary and see if we can unpack a little bit of what Sa'adia has done. Rashi has a comment. Let's see anything here. So he's going to mention the Agadah. So we depend upon the statement of Agadah, which he's commenting on the verse here. But it looks like it's talking about the second part with the separation or dividing root here, which might not be as important, this part, what he's saying here for the translation, so to speak. This is reading into the text a little bit more, but we could check out and see what this, just refresh our memory and see what this says. Yeah, I think this might be a little bit much for now, so we'll just leave that. But we'll continue down here and see. So Rashi mentions, and we could check this over in the Hebrew part too, that he's going to translate it as to see. That sounds a little better, which is over here, down at the bottom part. So he's going to translate it as to see. So God saw that it was good. That's how Rashi is going to go with it. Let's see what Ibn Ezra says here. Okay, so Ibn Ezra says that he thinks it should be more like perceived. And we can also look at that over here, see what roots they say. What they use here. Okay, so he says to perceive is how he wants to go with it. And let's look at I've forgotten when Allah knew. So we have know, see, and perceive. And so I decided when I translated this to go with Ibn Ezra and to put to sense or to perceive. I use the word sense as a kind of different, simpler term, which I'll go over in a second when I flip over to my translation, which I've just called it the New Onkelos Bible, just as a placeholder name. It's probably not going to have that if I ever, put this out into the into publication or anything like that. But just for now, I've put it that way because I want the translation that I'm doing to be a targum, which is really a commentary as a translation, because we know that anytime you translate something, you're actually commenting on what it means. So let's go quickly through the last verse. Vayikra Elohim laor yom velachoshech kara laila vayhi erev vayhi voker yom echad. So here, let's check the translations over here very quickly. And I think if I remember correctly, we don't have anything to worry about much here. And Allah named that night of time of day daylight. So there's not much difference here. Let's look at the commentaries. Rashi says, so it's going to be a question as to how to translate Yom Echad. Should we translate that as one day or the first day? And here we can see that Rashi says, in the regular way that people talk, they're probably meaning first day. So when I went to translate this, I go with what is kind of implied here. I want to be careful with the way I say it, but I think it's quite clear that this is ordinal numbers that are being implied, meaning first, second, third, not counting numbers 1, 2, 3. However, it would be a literal translation to do one day, or day one, you could say. And let's see what Ibn Ezra says. So he's commenting on why Laila appears to be a feminine noun, but it's masculine. And let's see if the note has anything. Yeah, not really. That's not super important. And so you can see here an association with Erev and Choshech, not super important for what I'm doing right now. And so let's go to now look at how, let me just read it all together in the JPS. God said, let there be light, and there was light. God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and called the darkness night. There was evening, and there was morning, a first day. So that's how the JPS is translating it. You'll see that they rely on gender-neutral language, saying God and God, God, instead of he. So then now let's flip over to my translation. So here I have just my document, and I have a very, very sort of messy set of notes up here that I've started to think about, which I'll just talk through really quickly, and some of the ideas that I want in the translation. When I'm translating for myself and for my understanding, and what the purpose of why I'm translating is to do, which is to create a new Targum from Hebrew to English. The issue with the Targum, which is there's actually an obligation to read the Torah 2 times each week in Hebrew and once in translation. That's what you're supposed to do. The Targum is meant to be the Aramaic translation. However, throughout time, as people have not really spoken Aramaic, and the Targum is not as useful as it once was, it is now appropriate to use Rashi's commentary instead of the Targum. However, I thought it would be interesting to have a translation that was a translation and not commentary, that would fulfill the purpose of giving you the rabbinic understanding of the Hebrew in the Bible. And so modern translations like the Jewish Publication Society and other modern Jewish scholarly translations are more focused on an academic translation, which is good but different from what Jewish religious purpose wants from translation. So in my translation, I do try to rely on a sort of what you could call artificially literal translation, in the sense that every time I translate one of these words, so if I translate Vayomer, he spoke or he said, I'm always going to translate Vayomer that way. Now, this is artificial because we would presume that the biblical authors had different understandings of Vayomer depending on what context it appeared in. However, writing thousands of years later, we do not have those nuances in mind when we're thinking about the Peshat literal meaning of the text. So to supply alternative shades of meaning is conjectural at best and is in fact a form of translation that is introducing a new understanding into the text. So every time I see the word vayomer, whatever I choose here, and I chose the word said, which gives away a little bit of my translation, but I'm going to translate amar, any root related from that root, aleph, mem, resh, as said. Even though that is a bit artificial, but it shows that we don't have the nuance of biblical Hebrew meaning that would be how the original audience understood it. I will deviate only if the commentators indicate that the rabbis understood something in a different way that needs to be translated differently. So if you're looking on the screen, you can see some very rough notes of the issues of Hebrew verbal morphology, which I'm not going to unpack too much here, but just to say that there's a bit of a debate as to how to translate the Vav consecutive and understanding Hebrew, biblical Hebrew tense aspects, rather. There was not really what we could call tenses in the sense of verb tense, past, present, future. There is imperfect and perfect. And what that means is up to a bit of scholarly debate. And so you can kind of understand it as past versus non-past, complete versus non-complete. There's debate as to whether the Vav consecutive flips the meaning or if it's sort of a lost conjugation pattern. So just so we know that as we go forward. Okay, so let's look over here and I will read my translation of verse. I'm going to read 1 and 2 and then also 3 through 5 just to get the full feeling of the translation. In the beginning of God's shaping of the skies and the land was empty and chaotic, and darkness was spread over the face of the deep, and God's wind blew gently over the face of the water. Then God said, "Let light be," and light was. Then God sensed that the light was good, and God separated between the light and between the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. Then there was sunset and sunrise the first day. So to continue with some notes from the previous verses, I translate Elohim as God, just to distinguish between that and the four-letter name of God that we'll see later. I have included some of the comments from Ibn Ezra and Rashi to inform my decisions and how to translate different words. I have not used gender-neutral language. I do use he when necessary, but I do like to repeat the name God when it's written in the text. So if it says Elohim, I'm going to say then God, not he. So even if that sounds redundant in English, it helps preserve the sound of the text, even if it might be artificial. There's an argument for preserving some of the feeling of the original text. I did also I chose the word separate for the part about dividing or separating the darkness and light. I did, as I said last time, I talk about sunrise and sunset. Oh no, I didn't talk about that last time. Hold on, let's go back over here to the text. So it says Vayehi Erev, Vayehi Voker. This is the first time that we've seen that. So I decided to translate that as sunset and sunrise, just because the literal meaning of the sun, that's how you know that it is occurring. So that's something that is different with my translation. And as mentioned before, I went with an ordinal reading of Yom Echad, first day, instead of day one. So that is the next two verses of Genesis, with commentary on the linguistic structure of the Hebrew and Aramaic and looking through the Targums. Next week, I'll continue with verse 6 through 8. Hope you have a great week. Bye-bye.